Given functions f and g, find a, f composite g of x and its domain, and b, where g composite f of x and its domain. So here are the given functions. F of x equals the square root of x, and g of x is equal to x plus 8. So let's go ahead and take a look at this example here. So we're going to do part A first. Okay, now again, what's important here is to recognize which one represents the inner function and which one represents the outer function. So f represents the outer function because it's on the outside, and then g is going to represent the inner function. Okay, so let's go ahead and write out this definition. So we have f composite g of x, which is equal to f being on the outer function, and then g, the inner function of the input x. Okay, so now g of x becomes the input. Okay, so that means that this function right here is going to be the input because that's what g of x is equal to. So now we're going to replace g of x to be the inner function. And that inner function, again, is x plus 8. Okay? And so now this x plus 8 becomes the input for the function f. So what is the function f? Well, we know what the function f is. That is the square root of x. So we have the square root of x, and now this becomes the input for x. So that means that we get x plus 8 and replacing x. So therefore, the answer is going to be the square root of x plus 8. So let's go ahead and put that answer in. So here we have the square root of x plus 8, and there's our answer. Now we want to find the domain of that function right there. So in order to find the domain of that function, okay, we need to know that what tells us about the square root function. Well, that means that this square root tells us that anything underneath the radical has to be either greater than or equal to 0. So that means that we need to set up to find the domain. And let me go ahead and put D here for the domain. We need to take the expression x plus 8 and set it to be greater than or equal to 0. So if we subtract 8 to both sides, that means x has to be greater than or equal to negative 8. Now remember, if we graph this, that means that at negative 8, any value has to include negative 8 and go towards positive infinity. So that would mean the following. We would have bracket going towards positive infinity. So therefore the domain is bracket negative 8 towards positive infinity. So let's go ahead and put that in there. So we have bracket, and I believe again that is negative 8, comma, infinity with a parenthesis. Press enter, and there is our result. Okay, now we need to find g composite f of x. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So that's the second one over here. Okay, so over here, we're going to find g composite f of x and its domain. So we're going to write the definition. So keep in mind here that g now is the outer function, and f is going to represent the inner function. So let's go ahead and write this out and with the definition. So g composite f of x. So g is on the outside, and on the inside now is f of x. Okay, so what does f of x equal? Well, f of x is this function here, which is the square root of x. So we have g of again, what is f of x? Well, we know that that is the square root of x. Okay? And so what that means is now we need to set that equal to the following. Well, we know that g of x is x plus 8, right? So we're going to put parentheses around that x because this is the input for that, and then we're going to add 8. And so therefore we know now that instead of writing x, we're going to write the square root of x. And so therefore the result now becomes the square root of x plus 8. So let's go ahead and put that in our result here. So we have the square root of x and then plus 8. And there is our answer. Now we need to find the domain of this function. Okay, now the 8 here is constant. So we don't have to worry about the 8, but we do need to worry about this radical. So just like we did with the other in part A, the expression underneath the radical is x, which means that has to be greater than or equal to 0. So if we graph this at 0, it's going to be greater than or equal to 0 towards positive infinity. So therefore the domain is going to go bracket all the way to positive infinity. So we have bracket, comma, bracket 0, comma, infinity. So let's go ahead and put our answer in. Bracket 0, comma, infinity with a parenthesis. Check our answer, and there is our result.